So I'm going to be focusing on what you can do if you're outside of the path of totality. And of course, it is all about the total solar eclipse. We want to encourage everybody to get into the path. And I'm sure you have all seen this. This is what I refer to as Michael's map of nope. And it really is quite serious, because in Eclipse Chaser will tell you, you just do not go to any other place. And it is all about in the path of totality. People can't travel. You know, not everyone can travel. Not everyone has the luxury of having the time off. And you can't move towns. You can't blame these communities for being outside of the path. And they will be impacted. So the eclipse is going to happen, and we all want to be in the path, but a lot of these places outside of the path will be impacted. So they do need to do planning as well. And more I've been contacted by businesses or people outside of the path saying, hey, I'd like to be involved. What can I do? So I think that's really encouraging. That's why I thought I'd focus it on here. So 3 examples I'm going to give. The first is the work that I did with the Shire of Ashburton, and that's the Shire next to the Shire of Exmouth in Australia. And I did this with Carol Redford, who's on the left, and she's the founder and chair of Astrotourism WA. She's really passionate about the night sky. I'm really passionate about eclipses. So we joined forces and we proposed the eclipse and dark sky strategy for the Shire of Ashburton. So we were involved in working with them for quite a few months. And it was a real great opportunity to do something in partnership with someone else. So I'll do that first, and then I'll talk about Carol's Eclipse Discovery Tour. And so this is for people who may be doing outreach activities outside of the path of totality. So she's got some outcomes for that. And the third thing I will share is the lovely Edwina in the middle. And she runs a station, a cattle station, which is also an outback stay outside of the path of totality. And will share some things that she had and some learnings that you can benefit from. So the first is about the Shire of Ashburton. It really is massive. And the size of Kentucky, Kentucky has 4.5 million people, but Shire of Ashburton is 13,000. It really is quite a special place. Tourism isn't really that well there, but there are some amazing, beautiful things. And so when we first started working with the Shire of Ashburton, I remember having a Zoom session. So we set up a steering committee that I co-chaired with Carol, and we were working with them about how to develop a strategy. And we put a lot of time into this. But there was one particular Zoom session I remember. So it was back in 21, maybe. And the CEO of the Shire, he was on Zoom, and he was asking lots of questions. And then he kind of leans into the Zoom screen and says, right, here's what I really want to know. How do we eclipse Exmouth? So there's always that competition, right? There's always competition between neighbours. And so as best you can do on Zoom, I kind of leaned forward and looked him in the eye as best as I could. And I said, you don't. You can't compete, and you shouldn't be, trying to take people away from the path to have them stay with you. The whole idea is that you support the path of totality. You're there as a support, and there's a lot of things that you can do, and you can have a lot more freedom and flexibility, not tied down with a lot of those other things that are that may get in the way. So that's what we did, and we developed an eclipse strategy for the Shire of Ashburton. I'm not going to talk to any of these because I've already presented this as a poster last time, and you can download it from the AAS website. But what I was able to say to him, and he really loved this, I said, because they are in the path of totality for 2038. They are right smack in the middle of it. So I was able to say to the CEO, I said, right, you are going to be Exmouth in 2038. And not only that, because you've already started planning, you are 15 years ahead. I've never heard of a community planning so far in advance. They already got their eclipse and dark sky strategy. And I said, that's how you eclipse Exmouth. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Watch that space. There's going to be a lot happening. And of course, Ashburton is going to get a whole lot of, anytime I do presentations, they're going to be, the word is out there. So they get a lot of promotion for that. So this is Carol's project, and it's the Eclipse Discovery Tour. And for many years, she's been working at grassroots level, promoting small communities to take part and engage with the night sky. And there really is an underdeveloped tourism need for this. People are looking, lots of Australians can, people look to know about the dark sky. And for the eclipse, she was able to get a project going. She did 27 events across 4 regions. She had 22 financial sponsors. There was a budget of about $110,000, delivered by 55 stargazing volunteers and space science communicators. The events reached 3,000 people. 1,500 were non-local. So they actually had a big impact on these really small remote towns. And you could see the whole reach. You know, she got people attending all these events. And the presentations were focused on 3 things. The first is about eclipse education and awareness to build buzz. The second was about Western Australia as an astrotourism development project. And the third was that they had people from the science community across WA delivering information about the science projects that were happening. So it really was quite impactful. And so she's saying that, you know, what makes it really successful is already having those established relationships with people on the ground. If you're applying for extra funding, make sure it covers workload support, because it was a huge undertaking and she needed to bring extra people in. And also for marketing, because there was no budget for marketing and a lot of people actually didn't know that this project was happening. And she suggested a 2-year lead-in time, because if you start developing these programs, they can be linked in with the tours, international tours, and then that's another marketable project. So, you know, a night sky activity for the Southern Hemisphere, it's really popular. And she's also saying that they found that they needed to pitch the science at a very basic level. And like we were saying before, never assume that people know the basics, and that they needed a PA system for the larger groups. They were expecting so many people to come to these. Aboriginal astronomy, there was certainly a lot of interest in this. And this is a place where they're going and doing more projects in the future. And she was really passionate about putting together bags so people can actually take away things like eclipse glasses, solar planispheres, Aboriginal planispheres, which explain the night sky from an Aboriginal perspective. A few other things that she wanted to put in, but she couldn't really get that going off the ground. But ambitious, and she's very happy to talk to anyone about that. So you'll find her at astrotourismwa.com. The third is Boolarra Station. So this is the outback cattle station I was telling you about. The path of totality, obviously between those 2 lines. Boolarra Station is outside of that. Now, of course, they didn't want to have a viewing site for the total solar eclipse because it's outside of the path. So they very much played a support role. And it was really quite popular. And as part of the organised planning, they took part in the driver reviver stop. Are you familiar with what that is? No. So in Australia, like in the US, we have lots of vast distances. So on peak travel times, if you're driving all across Australia, they have driver reviver stops. So you drive a few hours, you stop, you get a free cup of coffee and a Kit Kat. And then you can go on your merry way. And that reduces the risk of people driving tired. So they set up 5 of these along the path that people were driving from Perth. So they were the 5th one. And then they also did the staging for the emergency services staff. There were, I think, 8 fire units there. So they were in position so if there's any incidents on the road. So those 2 were other ways in which they were able to bring in a bit of income for that, as well as doing the 4-night minimum camping. And they arranged exclusive evening entertainment. They had bands, and they had Carol's final project the night before the eclipse was at Boolarra. And Bob, if you're listening, and your team, like you were there, and so if you want to hear about what Boolarra was like, yeah, absolutely. And so she put together some really good facts and figures for you, because it's just helpful knowing how many people and what the pattern was. She did have 4-night minimum, but she said some people stayed longer. Some people left, even though they might have had a night to go, but they left. What she found was interesting. She didn't expect an older demographic. So usually they have families camping, and there's, one site will have multiple people on. She said this time it was like one site could have one person on or a couple. So the sites were the same, but the numbers of people were lower. She noticed that people didn't spend much in the cafe and on merchandise, and it could have been because of the high cost of other things, but also because of the messaging was that supplies are going to be low, so you have to bring all your food and water and things with you. So that, remember I was talking a bit about the risk messaging, it really did scare a lot of people off. So people had their resources and they weren't spending in town, they weren't spending at these places. She found it very difficult to know how much to charge. She was aware of what was happening in the town of Exmouth with all the elevated prices and the 5-night minimums that were happening. And she wanted to make sure it was fair and reasonable. And just trying to figure that out was difficult. And she said she did manage to get that right. And it was really important to lock it in early, because people just want to be able to book their things. And locking it in early meant that other plans that were happening were able to know what they were doing, so they were able to take advantage of other things. So really good lessons there, I think. And the not to do, don't go too large. I think they wanted to actually have a massive big festival for people. And they started to go down the route of the licensing and everything. And it just seemed too much. It was very difficult to get decisions made in a short period of time. So they decided not to worry about that. They go with what they needed. And they are very glad that they kept it small. And by small, we mean like 500, quite large. But they had the facilities, they had the capacity to do that. And don't arrange competing events. So people actually went during the day, they explored the region, they came back at night and enjoyed the entertainment, the night sky gazing, and it seemed to work really well. So that's really good guidance for people who have property outside of the park of Totality. So any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if you want the contact details for those people, I'm happy to pass them on to. Thank you.